In 2006, Gerard Butler became a household name overnight. Millions watched him roar, "This is Sparta," and thought they knew everything about the film that changed his life. But for nearly 2 decades, Butler kept a secret about how 300 was actually made, a secret that reveals something shocking about the entire production. What he finally revealed completely changes how you'll watch that movie forever. Gerard Butler was not the first choice for King Leonidas. This is the part that most fans never knew. Director Zack Snyder had spent months searching for the perfect actor to lead 300. He wanted someone massive, intimidating, someone who could carry the weight of an entire nation on their shoulders. Butler was a relatively unknown Scottish actor working in smaller roles. He was talented, yes, but he wasn't the obvious pick. When Butler auditioned, something unexpected happened. Snyder saw something in him that wasn't immediately visible. It wasn't just the physical presence. It was the intensity. It was the way Butler delivered lines with this raw, primal energy that felt genuine rather than performed. But here's what makes this interesting: Butler almost didn't get the role because of one specific reason that nobody talks about. The studio wanted a bigger name. A celebrity who could guarantee box office success. They wanted Tom Hardy. They wanted someone already famous. Butler was fighting against the entire system. He was competing not just against other actors, but against studio executives who didn't believe in him. The odds were impossibly stacked against him. Yet Butler did something that changed everything. He trained like he was preparing for actual war. Not for the audition. Not for a callback. He trained because he believed in the character so deeply that he couldn't separate himself from Leonidas anymore. He pushed his body to limits he didn't know existed. He studied warrior movements, ancient history, and the mindset of someone willing to die for their beliefs. When Snyder saw what Butler had become, it wasn't just an actor anymore. It was a transformation. The studio eventually agreed, but they had doubts. Nobody expected this unknown Scottish actor to carry a $65 million film. Nobody expected him to become the face of one of the most iconic action movies ever made. But what happened next changed everything, and Butler kept the real reason hidden for years. But what he revealed about those early training sessions shocked even the filmmakers themselves. The training for 300 wasn't just intense. It was dangerous. Butler pushed himself so hard during preparation that he actually suffered a serious injury that almost cost him the entire role. This is what he finally revealed years later, and it explains why the filming process became such a nightmare behind the scenes. During pre-production, Butler was working with combat choreographers to master the sword fighting sequences. He was doing hundreds of takes, drilling the same movements over and over until his body moved on pure muscle memory. One day, while practicing an overhead swing, something went wrong. He felt a sharp pain shoot through his shoulder. At first, he thought it was just soreness. Every athlete gets sore. But this was different. This was an injury. The pain got worse. Days turned into weeks. Butler couldn't lift his arm properly. He couldn't perform the basic movements that the entire film depended on. And here's the part that makes this incredible: he never told anyone. Not the directors. Not the producers. Not even his closest friends on set. He kept training through the injury because he knew they were running out of time before filming started. Think about this for a moment. Butler had spent his entire career waiting for a role like this. He was 35 years old. This was his shot. If he admitted the injury, the studio would replace him immediately. They already had doubts about casting him in the first place. One legitimate reason to delay production, and they would find a new Leonidas. Butler would go back to being the unknown Scottish actor in forgettable roles. His entire future depended on pushing through something that was genuinely hurting him. So he did exactly that. He modified his training. He worked with trainers in secret to strengthen his shoulder without making the injury worse. He learned how to film certain scenes at angles that wouldn't aggravate the pain. He became an expert at hiding it. For months, Butler carried this secret alone, terrified that it would all fall apart. The pressure was absolutely crushing. Yet somehow, he made it through pre-production. Filming began. And then everything became even more complicated than anyone realized. Once filming started, the real challenge wasn't just the physical demands. It was the psychological weight of carrying an entire production on his shoulders while dealing with constant pain. Butler had to perform scenes that required him to be superhuman while his body was actively breaking down. The 300 Spartans didn't just fight. They performed an endless series of acrobatic combat sequences that pushed the boundaries of what human bodies could do on film. Butler had to do countless takes of sword swings, shield bashes, and intense hand-to-hand combat scenes. Every single movement aggravated his shoulder injury. Every take was a choice between pushing through the pain or admitting defeat. But there's something else that Butler revealed that changes the entire context of this story. During filming, he wasn't just dealing with his shoulder. He was also processing the weight of what this role meant. He was a Scottish actor who had spent years working in relative obscurity. Now he was leading a massive Hollywood production that had already generated massive hype and massive expectations. The studio had spent enormous money on this film. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting to see if he could pull it off. The stress manifested in ways that went beyond the physical injury. Butler developed insomnia. He was so focused on the character, so consumed by the pressure to deliver, that he couldn't sleep properly. He would lie awake at night, replaying scenes in his mind, wondering if he was good enough, if his performance was authentic enough, if he was going to let everyone down. Other cast members noticed he was different. Quieter. More withdrawn. But nobody fully understood what he was carrying internally. What's remarkable is how Butler channeled all of this, the pain, the stress, the insecurity, the pressure, into his performance. Every scene where you see Leonidas filled with rage and determination, that wasn't just acting. That was Butler's real struggle bleeding into the character. He was using his own battle to fuel the character's battle. The vulnerability mixed with the warrior mentality created something authentic that audiences could feel, even if they couldn't explain it. The filmmakers noticed something was different about Butler's performance, but they attributed it to his commitment to the role. They had no idea he was literally suffering through every scene. Then came the moment that changed his life forever. The most iconic moment in 300 wasn't planned the way most people think. When Leonidas yells, "This is Sparta," and kicks the Persian messenger into the pit, that scene was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be more controlled, more calculated. But what Butler revealed is that the raw intensity everyone remembers came from a place of genuine emotion that nobody expected. Butler was frustrated. Not at the scene itself, but at everything building up inside him. The shoulder injury. The sleepless nights. The constant pressure. The fear that he wasn't good enough. All of it had been accumulating for months. When Zack Snyder called for that take, something shifted inside Butler. He stopped thinking about the performance. He stopped calculating the movements. He just let everything out. That moment when Leonidas delivers the line with such primal fury, that wasn't a carefully crafted performance. That was Butler's accumulated frustration, his defiance against doubt, his refusal to fail, all channeled into one perfect take. Snyder knew immediately that they had captured something special. It was lightning in a bottle. It was the exact moment when Gerard Butler stopped being an actor playing a character and became the embodiment of that character. What makes this even more interesting is what happened after that take. Butler collapsed. Not dramatically. Not for show. He physically couldn't continue. His body had given everything it had. He sat down on the set and just breathed. For the first time in months, he had fully released everything he was holding inside. Cast members approached him asking if he was okay. He told them he was fine, but they could see he wasn't. He was emotionally and physically exhausted. Snyder understood what had just happened. He had witnessed Butler break through some invisible barrier. That take was going to be the centerpiece of the entire film. That moment would become the most memorable scene in 300. That one raw, honest explosion of emotion would define Butler's career. But Butler didn't know any of that yet. He just knew he had finally stopped fighting and started being. In that single moment, everything changed. The injury didn't matter anymore. The doubts didn't matter. The pressure didn't matter. Butler had created something so powerful, so genuine, that it transcended everything else. He had proven to himself and to everyone watching that he belonged in that role. But the real revelation came years later when Butler finally explained what he learned from that experience. When 300 premiered in 2007, audiences had no idea they were watching something that went far deeper than a historical action film. They saw epic battles, incredible choreography, and a leading man who seemed born to play a warrior king. What they didn't see was the journey of a man fighting his own battle while portraying someone else's struggle. This is the part that Butler revealed that completely reframes the entire movie. He said that every scene in 300 became autobiographical without him planning it that way. When Leonidas refuses to bow to the Persian king, Butler was channeling his own refusal to accept that he wasn't good enough. When Leonidas stands alone against impossible odds, Butler was reflecting his own solitary struggle during filming. When Leonidas inspires his men to fight for something greater than themselves, Butler was fighting for validation that he desperately needed. The film resonated with audiences on a level that had nothing to do with ancient history or special effects. It resonated because Butler's genuine struggle was embedded in every frame. People felt something real underneath the spectacle. They felt the authenticity of someone refusing to give up, refusing to accept defeat, refusing to believe the doubts others had placed on him. What's fascinating is that Butler didn't realize this was happening while he was filming. He was too deep in it, too focused on survival, too consumed by the day-to-day challenge of performing through injury and exhaustion. Only after the film was released and he saw the final product did he understand what had actually happened. He had accidentally created a masterpiece not because of perfect execution, but because of imperfection channeled into art. The "This is Sparta" moment that everyone remembers isn't memorable because of the stunt work or the cinematography. It's memorable because you can feel the desperation in Butler's voice. You can see the defiance in his eyes. You can sense that this isn't just a performance, this is a man at his breaking point transforming that breaking point into power. Audiences responded to that authenticity, even if they couldn't articulate exactly what they were responding to. Before we continue, do you think you would have pushed through an injury like Butler did to pursue your dreams? Or would you have admitted it and looked for another opportunity? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious how people approach these kinds of life-changing decisions. The final piece of this story reveals something even more surprising about Butler's recovery. Here's what makes Butler's story even more remarkable. After 300 wrapped filming, his shoulder injury didn't magically heal. In fact, it got worse. The months of pushing through pain, the countless takes, the physical demands of the role, all of it had accumulated into a serious injury that required actual medical intervention. Butler finally went to doctors after filming ended, and they were shocked at what they found. The injury was more severe than he had realized. He had been damaging his shoulder progressively throughout the entire production. A lesser injury might have healed on its own with rest. But what Butler had done was create a chronic problem that would affect him for years. He needed physical therapy. He needed to completely change how he trained. For someone whose career was just beginning, this was terrifying. He had just completed the role of a lifetime, but his body was paying the price. What Butler revealed is that he spent the entire press tour for 300 in significant pain. When he was doing interviews, smiling for photographs, appearing on talk shows, he was medicating himself just to get through each day. He was hiding the extent of the damage because he didn't want anything to distract from the film's success. He had sacrificed so much to make 300 great. He wasn't going to let anyone know that the sacrifice had actually hurt him. The fascinating part is that this injury became a turning point in a completely different way. Butler couldn't just jump into the next action film. He couldn't immediately capitalize on his newfound fame by doing another physically demanding role. He was forced to be selective. He was forced to rest. And in that forced rest period, he actually had time to reflect on what had happened to him. He realized that he had almost destroyed his body for a role. He had hidden a serious injury from everyone around him. He had let fear of being replaced, fear of losing the opportunity, fear of not being good enough, drive him to make decisions that hurt him. And yet, despite all of that, he had created something beautiful. Something that mattered. Something that would last. This revelation changed how Butler approached his career moving forward. He became more selective about roles. He became more honest about his limitations. He learned that you don't have to destroy yourself to create something meaningful. In fact, the best work often comes when you're honest about your struggles rather than hiding them. If you're enjoying stories that reveal what really happened behind the headlines and inside the lives of people we thought we knew, make sure you subscribe because the next part of this channel reveals something even more surprising about how Hollywood actually works. Stories like this one don't come around often, and you won't want to miss them. The final chapter of this story brings everything together. Butler didn't immediately reveal all of this. In fact, he stayed relatively quiet about the behind-the-scenes struggle for nearly a decade. When interviewers would ask him about 300, he would talk about the experience in general terms. He would mention the training. He would talk about working with Zack Snyder. But he kept the deeper truth locked away. Why would someone wait so long to share something so significant? The answer is more complicated than you might think. At first, Butler was afraid. He was afraid that admitting he had hidden an injury would make people question whether his performance was legitimate. He was worried that revealing the struggle would diminish the achievement. If people knew he was suffering, would they still believe that Leonidas was real? Would they think less of him for not being invincible? There's a strange paradox in storytelling. Sometimes the most powerful moments lose their impact if you explain exactly how they were created. But there was something else too. Butler was processing his own experience. He needed time to understand what had actually happened to him. He needed distance from the event to see it clearly. When you're in the middle of something traumatic or difficult, you don't always have the perspective to talk about it honestly. You're too close to it. You're still bleeding from the wound. Only after years of reflection, after his shoulder had healed, after his career had moved forward, could Butler actually articulate what that experience meant. Many people watching have gone through moments where life didn't go as planned. Where you had to push through pain, physical or emotional, to reach a goal. Where you had to hide your struggle because you were afraid that admitting it would cost you everything. If you've ever faced something similar, you're not alone. That experience of fighting through adversity while keeping it hidden is something that connects us all as human beings. When Butler finally did reveal this story in interviews years later, audiences responded with something unexpected. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy for his suffering. It was respect. People respected that he had been honest enough to admit the struggle. They respected that he hadn't used his injury as an excuse or a crutch. They respected that he had channeled his pain into his art. That revelation transformed how people understood 300. It was no longer just an action film. It was a document of human resilience. The legacy of 300 isn't just that it made Gerard Butler a star. It's that it proved something fundamental about art and struggle. The most authentic moments come from genuine pain. The most powerful performances come from real stakes. When you stop pretending to be invincible and start admitting what you're actually going through, that's when you create something that matters. That's when you create something that lasts. This story also reminds us that we never really know what's happening behind the scenes in the lives of people we admire. We see the final product. We see the success. We see the moment of triumph. But we rarely see the sacrifice, the doubt, the injury, the sleepless nights that created that success. Butler's revelation gives us a window into that hidden reality. It shows us that even the most extraordinary achievements are built on ordinary human struggle. The truth that Butler kept hidden for so long wasn't weakness. It was evidence of something much more powerful, the human capacity to push through impossible odds and create something beautiful anyway. That's the real story of 300. That's the real story of Gerard Butler. And that's the story that continues to inspire people years after the film was released. But this story isn't the only mystery that remained unsolved in Hollywood. The next story on this channel reveals something even more surprising about how films are actually made, and the secrets that actors keep about the most iconic moments in cinema history. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.